What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today I wanted to share with you my top 5 tricks and tips for new dungeon masters to take your campaigns to the next level. And if you're an experienced DM, well, maybe stick around, because one of these might be a gap in your knowledge or just be a good refresher if you're planning your next campaign or you're in the middle of your home game right now. I know certainly writing this list made me examine some of the things that I do, and I think that I'm better for it having written this list. So stick around and hopefully you'll learn something. And at the end, I'm going to give you one major thing to avoid doing as kind of a bonus at the end of the video. But before we get into the list, I wanted to talk about what it means to be a dungeon master to me. And if you're brand new to the hobby, if you're brand new to being a dungeon master, the DM is the master of the game. They run the combat encounters, they run the monsters, they run the NPCs that the players interact with. You generally are just in control of the world, and it's your job to challenge the players, keep them on their toes, but most importantly, make sure that everyone has fun. It's a big responsibility, but it can be fun for you as well. So without any further ado, let's get on to number 1, create a well-crafted story. One of the key elements of a successful D&D campaign is a well-crafted story. You can keep your players much more engaged and invested if they feel like they're part of a larger narrative rather than just running errands for some old guy with a beard. To create a compelling story, start by coming up with a theme that your campaign is going to be centered around. This could be something like nature versus civilization, the role of freedom against moral duty, traditional family versus found family. By starting with a theme rather than a plot, you then have a North Star that you can come back to when you're mapping out your central conflict, personal quest for the player characters, or notable NPC's side quest. All these things can feed back into one theme. In that same vein, spend some time creating a small cast of initial NPCs that the players will encounter early on in the campaign. This could be allies, enemies, or neutral characters that are just there to provide information and help move things along. Keep the cast small though, you don't want to overdo it. You want to leave some room for once your players give you their backstories for their characters that you can then insert NPCs from their backstories into the campaign as well. And finally, sprinkle in some versions or unexpected turns here and there when you're thinking about your central conflict and some quests here and there. Now, this is something you can absolutely overdo, and you will reduce its impact greatly if you do it too much. But if you just stick to a couple here and there throughout the entire campaign, they can really shine, whether it's the betrayal of a trusted ally, learning some interesting new aspect of the villain's motivations, or a sudden change in location for the entire campaign. All of these can really shake things up, keep people on their toes, and keep the momentum going with your story. Once again, though, don't overdo it. I overdo it a lot. I have to rein myself in. Don't overdo it. But remember, a good story with a strong central theme will absolutely go miles and miles in terms of keeping your players engaged and invested in the campaign for the long haul. Number 2, make your NPCs memorable. One of the most important responsibilities of a dungeon master is creating and controlling the non-player characters in the game. These characters can be absolutely anybody that's not controlled by a player, whether it's a shopkeep or the townspeople or a powerful enemy, an important ally, or some players call them expendable plot devices. To make your NPCs truly memorable though, try giving them something distinct about them, whether it's a personality or physical trait. Something simple like a unique scar or a missing eye, or if you want to get more complex, a specific way of speaking that's unique to them, or an outrageous set of beliefs. All those things can make your NPCs truly memorable for the players that get invested in them. And another way that is the bane of many dungeon masters out there, have some names ready to go for NPCs. If you're creating NPCs, absolutely name them in the moment, but also have some backup names just in case. Because rather than calling somebody the blacksmith or the shopkeep, calling them Galnard Fireforge or Rolthgar the Mighty, those are much more unique and will be much more memorable to your players. And finally, make sure when you're creating NPCs to give them their own motivations, wants, desires. D&D 5th edition has the excellent 4 personality trait breakdown thing. Use that for your NPCs. It will give you so much to work with when it comes time to roleplay with them. Whether it's the town guard that's motivated by a sense of duty and responsibility to the people that he wants to protect, or the powerful villain that's driven by a thirst for power or revenge, or if you want to get really interesting with it, flip those. The honorable, well-beloved town guard is actually in his post because he wants the power, because he likes the adulation, or he seeks revenge against a powerful townsperson that one day he will strike. Meanwhile, the villain does horrible and monstrous things against the townspeople but it's out of some perverse desire to protect them. They have this perspective, they see the big picture, and they understand that only by doing these things can they truly protect the larger population. By giving your NPCs more depth in their personality and their wants and desires, your players will absolutely be more engaged, immersed, and invested in those non-player characters every time they get to interact with them. Number 3, get immersive. One of the coolest things about D&D is the fact that it allows the Dungeon Master and players so much creativity to engage with each other, and you can use real life items to make that experience so much more immersive for the players at the table. For example, you could use music to set the mood for that particular session or for that particular encounter. If they're in the middle of a massive fight against a horde of orcs rushing over a hill at them, playing something properly epic with a lot of brass to it will get the players really going in that encounter. Meanwhile, if they're in a peaceful little hamlet, playing something with some flute, maybe some light percussion, just something to give them a little pep in their step, will also get them in the right mindset of how they're meant to engage with this part of the world. Also, using your own voice to create realistic sound effects for the players when they're interacting with different parts of the world, whether it's if they're fighting goblins, altering your voice when you speak as one of the goblins and you exclaim as they're being struck rather than going ah, can help the players really get into the proper mindset and get immersed in that encounter. Or rather than just speaking about the rickety old bridge that the players are crossing, using your voice to create the creaks and cracks of the bridge as they step on it will also do a lot of that heavy lifting for you to get the players really immersed in the world. Or my personal favorite, use physical handouts or trinkets that you may have around the house in order to give the players something tactile that will get them immersed. Being able to physically hold a map that you have created, or a note that they found in a desk, or if you have some old coins or a non-native currency wherever you're playing, handing those to them as money or just particular tokens that they find can also give them that tactile immersive experience. Number 4, encourage roleplay. One of the most enjoyable aspects of D&D for everyone at the table is the opportunity for the players to dive deep into their characters' personalities and motivations in order to suss out who they really are and what they want in the world. And by encouraging your players to roleplay, you can help facilitate that aspect of the game. It's important to note that roleplay doesn't necessarily mean talking in a particular voice, but rather just being willing to put yourself in the shoes of the character and speaking in the first or third person about what they want and what they're doing. To encourage role playing, encourage your players to write a detailed backstory. Not too detailed, not like 12 pages. Gary, just 1, maybe 1.5 if I'm feeling generous, but not 12. Never again. This can help them gain a better understanding about their characters' motivations, goals, and personality in general. You can also lead by example in encouraging roleplay by having your own NPCs, like we talked about before, having those distinct personalities, voices, characters trait. Your players will see you revealing this information about your non-player characters, and that will incentivize them and maybe encourage them to do the same for their characters if they haven't already. And by engaging with them in roleplay with these NPCs, talking in your own voices and things like that can really immerse the players and encourage that level of roleplay. And it's a great opportunity to try out your terrible Scottish accent that you've been wanting to workshop. And finally, do not be afraid to hand the reins over to your players and let them begin to drive the story. Nothing kills roleplay more than feeling like you don't have agency in the world. But if as a player, I feel like the decisions and the motivations that my character has and makes actually has an effect on the world and the story and where we're going in terms of the larger campaign, then I'm going to dive right in and engage so hard with your world because I know that it matters. But if I don't think it matters, I'm not going to do that. So encourage roleplay by letting your players help drive the story, help drive the narrative, and make those impactful decisions that can cause everything to turn on a dime. And as the Dungeon Master, that might be a little bit stressful for you, but you can always call the session there when they make a huge decision, be like, you know what? We'll pick this up next time. And then you can scramble to your notebook and frantically figure out what the heck you're going to do next. Number 5, keep things challenging but fair. As a Dungeon Master, it is your responsibility to provide a challenging and engaging game in terms of the obstacles, the monsters, everything that the players encounter in the world. You want to keep things difficult but fair for the players. You don't want them to feel like the cards are so stacked against them. It's important to strike the right balance between making things difficult for your players and not making things too difficult that it ends up frustrating them. But one way that you can ensure that the game is challenging but fun and fair, is to ensure that your players have all the resources they need in order to engage with the obstacles you're going to be throwing their way. If you're sending them on a particularly challenging quest, making sure they have all the information they need, maybe even a couple hints to where they can succeed. If it's going to be a really tough combat encounter, making sure they've had ample time to rest, or they have a good exit strategy in case things really go sideways. Another way to ensure that things stay fair is to be aware of your player characters and your players' strengths and weaknesses. If you have a group of players that are optimized or min-maxers to their core, like they build characters so well that the system buckles under their 820 damage per round paladin, then throw puzzles their way, throw social encounters, throw riddles at them, challenge them in places where maybe they aren't the strongest. Don't ignore combat because you want to reward them for the things they enjoy doing. But in order to keep things challenging, also throw things at them that they're maybe not expecting. Throw things at them that they can't rely solely on their character sheets and the dice to solve for them. And finally, do not be afraid to make adjustments on the fly. Every dungeon master before you and every dungeon master after you will screw up when they're creating an encounter. They will add too many enemies, they will add too few enemies, they will create the wrong environmental hazard that just throws everything out of whack. Adjust hit points. Adjust number of monsters, all those kind of things you can do on the fly. Because at the end of the day, if it's something that you screwed up and you need to fix it, I'm telling you, it's fine to make an adjustment on the fly. If it's just that your players are doing really well, they planned really well, they're excelling, then that's a bigger debate to be had. But if you screwed up, which you will, get the anxiety of that off of your shoulders, then it's okay to make those adjustments. Unless you're just the sadistic dungeon master that likes to see your players suffer, then let the dice fall where they may. Bonus tip: do not create a DMPC. As a dungeon master, you have the power to create thrilling encounters, immersive worlds, challenging villains. But with great power comes great responsibility. And one thing you should absolutely avoid doing is creating a DMPC or a hyper-powerful NPC that is central to the plot. Why, you might be asking, if you're already thinking about doing something like this? Well, at the end of the day, what is going to inevitably happen is they are going to outshine the players because your DMPC is going to know more than every other player character at the table. It's unavoidable. And additionally, if the party is having a group discussion and your PC chimes in with a thought, it could be totally unrelated to the plot. It could totally be unrelated to the actual solution. But your players are going to assume that your character knows more than they do. And I get it. A lot of first-time DMs are doing it out of necessity. You wanted to play the game too. You had a cool character concept for an arcane trickster that used Mage Hand to pull pranks on everyone. But nobody else wanted to be a DM, and you had the books, so it's you. But don't be sad about it. Keep that character tucked away somewhere. You might get to play sometime down the road when one of your other friends decides that they get the DMing itch. It does occasionally happen, but I would heavily encourage you to find the joy in everything else we've talked about. Immersing your players in an exciting, engaging world, providing unique obstacles in their way that they get to overcome, creating cool and unique NPCs for them to interact with. Heck, take that rogue arcane trickster idea that you had, make him the villain. Make him your big bad. Throw your creativity into the backstory of your villains, the allies of the party. Write those stories, and then let the players interact with them and see how much they enjoy your creativity. Focus on creating an interesting and balancing world with a robust cast of NPCs, and then step aside, let your players step into the spotlight and experience the story. So in short, no DMPCs. Sorry, folks. Just save yourself the collective frustration of the table and let the players shine. Being a dungeon master is one of the most rewarding things you can do in this hobby. It is so much fun when you run a session where all of the players are bought in and having a great time. You can feel it, they can feel it, and genuinely, it's the best feeling you could have at the table. If you want some ideas on whether or not you should run maps and minis or Theater of the Mind, things like that, I have a video right here that you should check out. Thank you for watching the video. I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.